Nick, can you unmute yourself?
Yeah, sure.
You can start, Nick. We've got over 30 people online.
Okay, okay. Hello,
Thanks
hello everyone.
again for doing this on behalf of PsySSA for us.
No, no, that's my pleasure. So just hello everyone. Welcome to this workshop that we're doing this evening on writing a conference abstract, structuring a conference abstract. My name is Nick. I am a researcher at UNISA. I have had, I suppose, a fair amount of experience in putting together conference abstracts for research papers, etc. Um, you'll see when we go through it, it's on the surface of it, not an especially difficult thing, and it's not in a it's it might seem intuitive to some of us, and maybe to some degree it is, but it is useful to have a number of sort of guidelines and a number of little tips and tricks to keep in mind when doing it to kind of write the best abstract you can. Um, I know sometimes people want to know whether the presentation will be available. I think it will be available. I think Shazia will send it um, after the presentation to those who attended. So yeah, you're welcome to. Don't stress if I go too fast, but I will try not to. Um, and with regards to questions, very much encourage for people to ask questions. You can ask it during the talk if you like, if you prefer to do that. But otherwise, I will make some time at the end for people to ask. And you're, of course, also welcome to email me afterwards, but I would encourage to ask here. That way, everyone can learn from the questions that we have. Um, okay, I'm going to share some slides now. How do I do this? Share. Um, can you all see this?
Yes, we can.
Okay, cool. Okay, so uh, this is kind of just to sum up what I've kind of already said. There's not one single way to do an abstract. There's no kind of hard or fast rules. One must do this for an abstract, one must do that. Um, and you'll see when you go to a conference like PsySSA, you'll get a little booklet of all the abstracts, and it's immediately clear that it takes all sorts of abstracts to make a conference. There's not one approach. People do it in lots of different ways. But with all of that being said, with the openness to, let's say, structural diversity, but also writerly diversity. People have different styles, and a conference like PsySSA accommodates all of that. But it is even despite all of that openness to diversity, it's still possible to tell what a good abstract is from a bad one. So I'm hoping today to offer people some tips and tricks in putting together what I think is makes a good abstract. So I'm saying this word abstract a lot, but maybe some people aren't familiar with what an abstract is. What an abstract is basically, it's a kind of condensed, concentrated paragraph that gives a summary of your presentation. Um, and so the function of the abstract is to kind of market or explain your presentation. It gives a little condensed snapshot of it, and attendees at the conference can then read that abstract to see if they want to come. It kind of shows your audiences what your research is about. But it's kind of, I think there's sometimes a perception of an abstract that it is a kind of cold, condensed, truncated version of your full presentation. There's ways that you can also ensure that a bit of you is reflected in your abstract, and there's different ways to do this that we'll go into. But it's the position that you take, you can put on your abstract, the style, your writerly style, the approach you take, etc. These are all little sort of glimmers and fragments of who you are. So abstract doesn't have to be a sort of removed clinical cold thing. It's your research, but you are also part of your research, and I think you can show that in your abstract. Okay, so before you even get to writing your abstract, structuring your abstract, you do have to sort of find a conference that you want to present at. I assume most of us here are interested in going to the PsySSA conference, which is great, but there are also other conferences to look into, and it's generally the same process as PsySSA. And when you're looking at a conference, you need to look at a number of different things, the suitability for your research. If you want to go to PsySSA, but you have nothing whatsoever to do with psychology in your research, it's probably not a good fit for your research. Legitimacy is important. There's a lot of sort of what you might think of as scam conferences that are just trying to get you to pay a fee and then there's no conference at all. So just make sure that the conference is legitimate. PsySSA, I promise, is legitimate. And ethics. Everyone here will have a personal sort of ethical compass, and you need to see whether the conference that you go to aligns with that ethical compass. Sometimes conferences receive funding from unethical sources. Sometimes there might be platforming an unethical person. So you just look into the ethics as well, as that is important to a lot of us. Yeah, so after you've sort of looked at the conference itself, then you need to check the conference website and read the submission guidelines carefully. That's where you'll see the abstract that you'll need to write. And you'll see on the submission deadlines, it'll say things like, sometimes it gives you the structure that they want the abstract to be. Sometimes it'll say the number of words the abstract must be. There'll be a deadline that you generally can't miss. So pay attention to that. And I should have had this a bit earlier, but every conference, for example, PsySSA is a conference. It's about psychology, but every PsySSA conference is a theme. I think this year's theme is solidarity. So it's good if you can get your abstract to kind of speak to that theme in some way. That sort of shows the conference organizers that you are gearing your presentation to not only the conference but the theme of that specific conference, and so you can reflect that in some way in your abstract. That'll be great as well. Okay, I'm assuming there's no questions, or people are going to hold the questions till the end. That's all fine. So I'm just gonna move on to the next stage, which is preparing your abstract. Again, I'm just giving general things here, then I'm going to go into more specifics. But this is just a sort of broad overview, is that presumably a lot of you, especially postgraduate students, will be basing your presentation that you're going to give at PsySSA, and so therefore the abstract that you'll be writing, on your thesis, whether it's your honors, your master's, or your doctoral thesis. So you need to be quite familiar with your sort of source material, which is often your thesis, when writing your abstract and then later your presentation. Then the main thing with the abstract is because you're limited in words, and you also want to, you want to grab the audience, and it's almost like the shorter the better. You try to keep it as succinct as you can and as informative as you can. Those kind of two things keep in mind throughout: succinct, informative. Convey the most that you can with the least amount of words. And I think before you even begin writing the abstract, be sure about what you want to present on. Sometimes, especially if you're doing, for example, a PhD thesis, you won't be able to present on everything. It's too much. So you need to sort of hone in exactly what you want to present on, and then also to whom you are presenting. Who are you interested in seeing your presentation? It might be the case that you want everyone to see your presentation. That's fine. But maybe you want students to see it. Maybe you want community psychologists to see it, or cognitive psychologists, or a particular kind of psychologist. So have that audience in mind when you are doing the abstract. Importantly, try to minimize jargon. So words that only those in your field understand. Because immediately, if for example, if I am looking at abstracts and people from, say, a field I don't know much about, developmental psychology, are using terms or evoking theorists that are familiar to developmental psychologists, but I don't know who these people are, what these theories are, then I'm probably not going to go to that. So try keep it as open as possible. Sometimes it's impossible to not use a little bit of jargon, but just to minimize it as much as possible. The other thing is to keep that deadline of the abstract, keep it in mind and just have it ready not on the day. Sometimes systems crash. Sometimes you confuse the times or something. If you can submit before the deadline, do that. Have it ready a couple of days before, then you submit it, then it's done, and you don't have to worry about missing the deadline by an hour or something like that. The other thing to do is, because sometimes things make sense in your head, or you can maybe overthink something in the abstract. It's always good to try and get another pair of eyes to look over it. So this can be your peers, those who you're studying with, or just friends, supervisors. It's really great. I would strongly encourage, especially if you're a postgraduate student, to get your supervisors to look over it, and ask them to give advice where possible, or maybe a mentor that you have, just to get another perspective on your abstract is really useful for tightening it and keeping that succinctness and informativeness, to hold both of those things. Almost always someone will have some comment or improvement to make. And yeah, I think that's quite important. Take the abstract word count. It's tempting to go above that, which you, especially if it's an online submission, you won't be allowed to do. But try not to go too far below it. If you have 200 words, try and get as close as possible to those 200 words. Sometimes they're really strict, sometimes 150 words, and then you've really got to just hone in on exactly what you want to say. And then the last thing is to, whatever the abstract you're writing for, keep in mind the format of what the abstract is for. It's usually an oral presentation. I imagine a lot of people here are doing oral presentations, but it might also be a poster presentation, or it might be a roundtable discussion where a few of you are talking. And so have that in your abstract. You need to say, in this presentation, I'll be doing this, or in this round table discussion, I'll be doing this. So have the form, the presentation format in mind when you're writing the abstract. Okay, so this, and again, as I said, you'll get these slides. Shazia will send these slides, so you don't have to make lots of notes if you're finding this useful. But this is the kind of structure that the abstract can take. Again, as I said, this is not the only way to do it, but I think especially if this is the first time you're doing an abstract, or you're quite new to this kind of thing, you can't really go wrong with this kind of structure. So I'm going to go through each of these things now, these sort of 8 components of an abstract, and then I'll give a little example at the end to kind of show it. Okay, so the title that you need to have clear as possible. Remember, this is the kind of this is the thing that people are going to be skimming when they're looking at all the abstracts. So you don't want it to be like say like sometimes it's like 2 words, and then people are like, okay, I don't know what that is, so skip. It needs to kind of be clear and descriptive and engaging. So those 3 things. It's not ambiguous what you're going to be talking about. It's got a bit of description in there, so the reader's drawn in to read the full abstract, and it's engaging to some degree. 12 to 15 words. Generally, there's a word limit, but 12 to 15 words is all right. A bit shorter than that is also good. And the kind of basic format is to have the idea, the design, and the context. So, for example, you might be looking at fathers. You might be doing focus group discussions, and this might be set in South Africa. So you got to have those 3 sort of things in your title that reflect what you're going to be talking about in your presentation. Okay, this seems quite clear, but it can sometimes cause a bit of tension, and so it's good to just kind of do it properly. Authors and affiliations. Okay, so if you are doing if this is based on a master's or a PhD or something, check with your supervisor. Do they want to be an author on it? Maybe in some institutions, I think it's mandated. I don't know. It's good just to check with your supervisor, or maybe others you're doing the study with, whether they be fellow students, fellow researchers, or people outside of the university, NGO stakeholders, people from different community organizations, for example. Check with everyone involved in your study if they would like to be an author on it. Maybe they won't, but I think it's always good to check. If you have funding, this should somehow be reflected somewhere in your affiliations, whether it's at the end of the presentation or not, is up to you. If you have funding that you know of, that's great, but also maybe just check with your supervisor. Maybe they're using funds that need to be reflected. And as I say, include everyone who assisted. Maybe it's just someone who sorted out transport, or caterers if you had access to those. I think it's good to acknowledge as many people as possible in the presentation somewhere. Okay, so now that the sort of title and authors are up the way, your introduction or your background. This is important, but it mustn't be too long. It must set the stage for the main event of your presentation. So in your abstract, it must be really condensed, and it has to exist, but it can't be too long. And I think that's quite a common mistake. People write a long background and introduction in the abstract, and just to kind of show readers that the person writing the abstract is well versed in the literature, but then they only leave themselves a couple of sentences for their study. So 2 or 3 sentences, preferably 2, 3 at the absolute most, just to introduce the context of your study. The context being the literal context, maybe the country or community or province that it's set in, but then also the scholarly context. What are people writing on this thing? And in touching on the context, you gesture towards gaps in the scholarship. So people are writing on this, they're doing this, but what they're not doing, or what they're not doing as much, or not doing in a particular way, this study is going to do. So that's how you kind of introduce it in the abstract. Show what's been done, and in that there's a gap, what hasn't been done, and that's where you will be coming in. So again, not too lengthy and to the point is ideal for the introduction and the background. The next is to give the objective of your study. So again, as concise as possible. If you can do it in 1 sentence, that's great. And you need to be as specific as possible, which is useful for the audience if they know exactly what you're doing, but it's also useful for you, because then you can keep going back and say, like, okay, what exactly am I going to do? Am I doing in this presentation again? Yes, I'm speaking to this very specific thing. And you can also ask it as a question. So you can say, you give the context, the background, and then you say, like, this hasn't really been done. So in this presentation, I'm asking, how can it be done? And how can it be done in this way? And in that, you show how you're addressing the gap in the scholarship that you noted in the background section that came before this. So again, you have that context and you have that gap. And then in the objective, you say how you are speaking to that gap. Okay. Now that you've sort of said exactly the gap that you're going to speak to, you need to allude to the study design or the framework. Again, it's really important, the methods section, but try touch on it quite quickly. You don't want to dwell too long on it. So you can say you're using a qualitative approach or interviews, and the tense that you use is important here, because are you busy doing this, or is it completed, or do you plan to do this? If you haven't done it at all, it can be quite difficult to do a presentation on that. But if you're in process, that's not a problem. You go, in this study, I am interviewing, you speak in the present tense. Or if you completed, in this study, I have interviewed. The context is important to state here. Try not to be too broad, like not South Africa, but if you can say the province or the communities or the neighborhoods that you worked in. The population is important, say the participants or who took part in the study, how many, demographic information, especially if that's important. If you can, you say how you recruited participants. So I, spoke to 10 people with whom I work, based here in Paro, Cape Town, South Africa, etc. And then you also say the analysis that you use. So you say how you collected the data. I did a focus group discussion, and then I analyzed the data that was collected using critical discourse analysis, or SPSS. Have that in your abstract, so it's clear how you got your data, but also how you analyzed your data. Again, a couple of sentences, one or two relatively short sentences. The method, unless you're doing a methods presentation, which I don't imagine a lot of us are doing, try and keep it short, because it's not the most exciting part of the presentation generally. It can be, but a lot of the times it's the results that people want to see. So that now is what we move on to, the results. And now if you've written, say, a thesis or an article, it's tough summarizing all your results. But it can be done. It's sometimes useful to look at other abstracts to see how people did it, but you kind of, it depends on what your results are. If it's themes, if you did a thematic analysis, you kind of say the names of the theme and then like a quick description of each theme. If it is statistical data, you give those numbers and maybe the brief interpretation of what they mean in the context of your study. It's a summary in the abstract, and it's giving an overview, a broad overview of what you found in the study. The more engaging, the better. So if you can give a little bit of description, especially a description that speaks back to that context and that gap that you highlighted earlier in the abstract, that's really ideal. And again, there's not one way to do this. There's not one kind of results that you can present in an abstract. Sometimes it's statistics, sometimes it's text. It might be the case that you are still collecting your data, that you haven't actually finished it, which is also fine. You can say provisionally what has been found is this. I hypothesize that the data is going in this direction, or that we're going to get more of this because of this. You don't have to hide the fact that the study is in process. Ideally, it would be complete, but it doesn't need to be. And so as long as you just reflect that in your results as honestly as possible, I think it's okay. The next is the conclusions. And the conclusions, in a way, the results and the conclusions are the exciting part of the abstract. It's what draws people in the most to your study. So go kind of, when you get to the conclusions, try to see it as holistically as you can. So you go back to that original research question that you asked earlier in the abstract, and then you need to use your results to see how to answer that question. I identified this gap in the literature. I then said how I was going to address that gap. This is what I found in relation to that gap. And then in the conclusion, you're going to say, how did I fill that gap? Maybe you didn't. Maybe you found what other people have found. Maybe you found something quite novel. Maybe you found that there's a reason that people aren't speaking to that gap. Participants aren't willing to talk about this thing. It's too expensive to look at this thing. All of that is legitimate, but you just need to go back to your research question and tie this into your results that you found. When you at your conclusion, which is obviously it's conclusive in a way, it's the last part of the abstract and it's trying to bring things to a close, don't introduce anything new, not like a new concept or like a brand new sort of exciting direction. Try and sort of keep it within the bounds of the study, but you can gesture towards the future, like this might help us do this, which, okay, maybe that is new, but it's not completely new in the context of your abstract. It can draw on previous things that you've alluded to. If you are a bit uncomfortable in saying, for example, contribution to knowledge or something, or scholarship, or to the gaps that you identified. You can also say what this means to your field or the method that you used. So you can say what the study shows psychologists, or psychologists working in communities, or psychologists working in institutions, is that this, and this. Or you can say, methodologically, maybe some of you are using interviews, and interviews are especially useful for studying this particular thing, or they aren't useful. And maybe it points towards ways that the method could be improved. You can use visual data in addition to linguistic data. So you can basically just speak to what your results mean for the field, not only for the field or the method, not only to knowledge. The other thing to think about is generalizability. What that means, for those who don't know, is you got particular results for your study in a particular context. Maybe you spoke to 8 people, maybe you spoke to 300 people, but whatever happens, you did this research in a particular context. Does this apply to other contexts, and does that matter? In quantitative research, they speak about generalizability. In qualitative research, which I'm more familiar with, people often speak about transferability. You did this. Can these results, what is the implications of these results? Can they be taken to other contexts? Do they mean anything for other contexts? You can allude to that in your conclusion if you think it's relevant, and it often is relevant. You just need to you give some thought as to how you approach that. In the conclusion, because as I said, the conclusions, the conclusion and results are the exciting parts of the abstract. It's what draws people in often to the abstract. And so focus on what is relevant and exciting in your study. So say, like, look, this is what I found, and not a lot of studies have found that, or I used this in this study that hasn't really been done in a fleshed out way, or over the period that I did it, or with a population group, or in this community, or something like that. Just if you can, draw out what was quite novel or exciting or relevant about your research. Maybe your research is being done at a particular moment in history where things haven't happened in the way that they're happening now. And so to do this particular research in the way that you are doing it at this moment in time is relevant and exciting, and you can say that in your conclusion. That's a way to kind of sometimes draw people in. You also don't have to pretend that the study went perfectly. Studies seldom do go perfectly, and I find it quite refreshing when people talk about what didn't work. There's no sort of, I don't think, a failed research. Okay, I've written here failures are okay, so maybe failure is not the right word, but things that go wrong, if you want to speak about that in your conclusion, that's also fine. Like this, people can learn from what didn't go right, just like you can learn. And I find that quite nice when people are willing to share that kind of thing. And you might often find, when it gets to the presentation stage and you're sharing what didn't quite work, people in the audience react well to that and say, yeah, I've also tried this, it didn't work, and you can try this went better for me. And it's a kind of nice space to engage, is what I found. And then lastly, something to put in the conclusion is the implications or the impact of your research. What does your research mean in the real world? Does it have an impact in the real world? What are the implications in the real world? Or what is the impact and implications for knowledge, for theory, for how we understand this particular problem? That's quite an important thing, I think, to put in the conclusions. To say, yeah, that sort of impact. People like to have a kind of concrete thing that they can take away. Like, okay, this is what the study gave us. Okay, and then this is that's kind of the abstract, the front part, the title, the authors and the affiliations. Then it's the background, the methods, results, conclusion. It's kind of like it's your thesis in miniature, and really miniature, and it's the way to kind of advertise it. But then it must also have kind of 4 to 5 words which are called keywords, that you also need to append to it. These keywords need to reflect your content, and so they can be they can even just be your method. It can be like interviews. It can be the main topic you're looking at. So healing, the unconscious, whatever. Put that into your as abstracts, and you need to have kind of 4 or 5 words that reflect the content of your abstract, and it also helps to categorize your presentation. PsySSA receives a lot of abstracts, and Fatima and her team do a very good job of sort of categorizing these many abstracts under different headings, and these keywords that you'll include help them to do that. And it also helps audiences to sort of follow, okay, yes, I'm interested in time. Here's 3 presentations that are dealing with time. Let me go to those. So the keywords seem inconsequential, but they actually are quite important for the conference itself and the audience that you might attract. Okay, so before is it the yeah? Okay, so I'm going to go to a little example in a moment, but I thought it might be useful just to have some sort of general things to take away. I know I started off with some general things, but these are some other general things that I've based on kind of questions that people have often asked, and just some things to keep in mind. So the first I've said many times, but it can't be said enough. Clarity, be concise, avoid sort of bloat or overly descriptive language or lots of adjectives. Try and get to the point as much as possible. So the first round of when you write your abstract, you kind of have lots of ideas, you put them all down. And then after that, it's cutting for clarity, cutting for conciseness, and just sort of trimming it as much as possible to get the sort of neat, stripped down, to the point abstract as far as possible. When abbreviations are used, spell them out when you first use them. So maybe you don't want to write South Africa every single time, but you do write it out the first time you use it in your abstract, then you put in brackets SA, and then from there you just do SA. That's kind of an obvious example, but especially if there's abbreviations that are particular to your field. AI, for example, which we'll come to in a moment. You first write out artificial intelligence, then you do AI. Even if you think everyone knows what AI is, just spell it out at the first mention. That's kind of it's a good thing to keep in mind, and it's sort of the convention with these things. I didn't say this earlier, but it is quite important. Don't include references, tables, and figures in your abstract. So I know a lot of us are sort of trained, like when we say Freud, we have to put the year afterwards that Freud wrote this thing. But for the abstract, you don't have to do that. You're generally not speaking about theorists too much in the abstract anyway. But your presentation is going to flesh all that out. So you can say, research has found that, and then you don't have to have a reference in your abstract because you're going to touch on that in your presentation. And tables and figures, obviously, also not. So it's just stripped down bare words, basically. If you think that it's fundamental to have an idea of when some kind of research was conducted, you can say something like over the last decade or since 2015 or something like that. But you don't have the reference itself in the abstract. The other thing is, try not to assume that your audience knows what every thing that you say means or refers to. There might be a case, and you don't want to have too much of this, but you might have to kind of slow down and define key terms. So sort of in community psychology, the phrase dignity refers to in this study, dignity has been studied in these ways. In this study, I'm going to. So it might be useful to unpack certain terms for audiences if you can. Again, words are quite tight, but you might find that the reader has a better sense of what you're going to say if they have a kind of base definition that you can structure your abstract around. So yeah, give that some thought. If you think it's quite a jargony word that needs definition, you can define it, especially in the background section. Okay, I've said this earlier. You don't have to put the funding financial statement in the abstract, but it or the conflict of interest. But it's good to have that in the presentation somewhere. You can speak to recent work. I think that's ideal. But as I say, you can also refer to canonical work or like the big research. So especially if it's a well-studied topic, you can refer to the older stuff, but then also bring in the new innovative stuff. AI, can you use AI to do an abstract? I think the general rule that people will probably say is that you can only use it to sort of edit or help refine. My personal position, I can't stand AI, so I would rather people don't use it for anything. That's not the rules. That's just my personal preference. And we can we can talk about that if you want, but maybe it is just a personal thing. But as far as I understand it, AI can be used to kind of, I don't know, it can't be used to generate the content of your abstract, basically. And if it was up to me, it wouldn't be anyway. So this is what I said earlier, but it bears repeating again. Get others to look at your abstract, to proofread it, to see if you've left out any important information. And when you ask them to look at it, ask them, I don't want you to say this is perfect. No abstract is perfect. But to please give advice. And you don't have to take that advice if you don't think it's good, but it's really, really helpful to get another pair of eyes to look at stuff. You can have a research question, but try not to ask questions like some people will write in there. So what does this tell us about community psychology, or where does this situate us today, or something like that? It's not really good to ask a question in the abstract. You can do it in the presentation, but try sort of work in statements rather. Avoid repetition because it can make the abstract look a little bit people can get bored, but also because you don't have a lot of words. So if you've said something, don't repeat it. And the generalizations are important. As I say, like, can you generalize this to other studies? But don't make a huge thing about how it applies to other settings, and try not to make broad, sweeping statements. You're focusing on your study in this abstract, and try and keep it there. The other thing, and have this in mind right at the start, I should have maybe said this earlier. When you do your presentation, are you going to focus on the conclusion or the procedure? So is it what you found in your study and what you're inferring from those findings? Or is it how you did your study? I imagine most of us, it's what you found, but for some of us, it might not be. It might be you did the study in a really innovative way, or how you did the study teaches us something really important. And that's what you're going to focus on. And if you know that from the start, then you know where the emphasis is going to fall in the abstract. Is it going to fall on the conclusion or on the methods? Or is the methods kind of what you also found at the same time? So as I say, it's probably what we found for most of us, but not always, and it's good to have that in mind. Are you want to I've written here informative or descriptive. So what this means is, are you wanting to inform your audience, to tell them something new, something innovative, something that you found in your study? Or are you describing your study? Do you think there's benefit to be had in just showing how you did your study, describing the context, the method, and what you did? I imagine a lot of us it'll be informative, but it might not be. It can also, there's a lot of value in descriptive as well. And then I said this earlier, but just to stay ahead of deadlines, try not to cut it too fine. You might, as I say, systems can go down. You can miss it accidentally. You misread the time zones in different countries can be a problem. So try and submit a couple of days before if you can. Okay, we are coming to the end, and so there'll be time for people to ask questions. I haven't seen any hands or anything. This is okay. I hope people don't think I'm being narcissistic here, but I was looking for an abstract to show you, and then I was concerned I wasn't allowed to use other people's research, or someone would be upset, so I just had to use something I wrote a while ago with some colleagues. This wasn't an abstract for a conference, it was an abstract for article, but nonetheless, it's got all the kind of things that we touched on. The title, you can see here, it's young people's productions of this discourse. So it gives the kind of broad context. It's got the idea and it's got the framework in there. Next is the three authors of the article, and then beneath that is our affiliations. You'll see here is the keywords number in this kind of purple block here. Fathering, young people, provider, South Africa, intersectionality. Those are the kind of main things that people looked at, well, the people that we looked at, and it helps to classify the article. Then you'll see this, again, I'm not reading it, I'm not going into too much detail here because you will get these slides so you can look at this yourself if you find it useful. But we began here with the background, talking about what this fatherhood discourse means in the context of South Africa. Then there was the method that we used was photo interviews, and the objective was to kind of look into this discourse. Then you find the results that we used. We used this kind of framework, and in this framework, there were two discourses. Or no, what did we say here? Participants. Okay, yeah. So how they described you drew on this discourse, and then finally conclusions. What this means for fathering research in general. Okay, so this is the last kind of slide that I'll speak to, and then I'll open it up to you all. Once you've done this abstract, you've submitted the abstract, you hopefully get an email or some sort of confirmation from the conference organizers to say, like, congratulations, you've submitted it, or it often comes in the form of an email. If you don't get that confirmation, it's good to follow up with the conference organizers and say, hello, I submitted this. This was my title. Just checking that you got it, because maybe something went wrong. So if you don't get a confirmation, email the conference organizers. And then you need to have a bit of patience, wait to hear from the organizers. They'll often say when you should have heard back by. If you haven't, and the conference is drawing closer, you don't have to, they do owe you a response if you've gone to the effort to submit an abstract. So you can email them and ask, hello, I haven't heard. I'm just checking on the status of the abstract. So you can follow up after some time. If you do hear back from the organizers, there's generally three things you'll get. Accept with no revisions, abstract, you're welcome to come present your conference. A slight revision, so sometimes, okay, this is a nice abstract, but you didn't really touch on this, or you left this out, or what did you mean by this? And so people might offer you some feedback, and you can, generally the feedback's not devastating, so you can see to that feedback in some way. It often improves the abstract. If you really think the feedback is going to ruin your whole thing, your whole abstract, your whole presentation, you can engage in some sort of dialogue with the conference organizers. I think that's fair. And this is obviously unfortunate, it's sad, and it's the worst outcome, is reject. So sorry, your abstract was not accepted. If you aren't given a reason, you can ask why. I think that's fair. So, did it not fit with the conference? Was the topic off? Did I misunderstand how I was supposed to do this? It's good to have some feedback, just so you can know what to do for the next time. And then lastly, and again, I probably should have said this earlier, but have in mind your presentation that you're going to do. So don't promise a whole bunch of stuff in your abstract, and then it comes to presentation and you kind of under-deliver, like, oh my God, I'm not actually going to talk about any of that stuff. Have that in mind while you are putting together your abstract, and so you kind of map that. It's easy to map that abstract onto your presentation. Obviously, your presentation doesn't have to be exactly the same as your abstract, but it is good that it reflects it in some way. And that is everything I have to say on that. As I say, you are welcome to email me, and you will get this presentation. But I really do encourage people to to ask questions here, just so that people can learn. I think we're all learning about this kind of thing. I still don't write the perfect abstract, so yeah, I'm also keen to hear from all of you. Yeah. There's a couple of questions here in the chat I can see, so I can address these, and then yeah, if people want to also speak, I'm very happy with that as well. So the first one says, how many words should an abstract have? That differs. It's a good question, and it's just a very important question. That every conference is different. Generally, it's about 200 to 250, but check, because you do want you don't want to go too below, and if you go over, sometimes it doesn't let you on the system, and then just cuts you off halfway. So you don't want that. And yeah, so you can't go over, you can't go too below. It's check, find that out before. The other thing is, have your abstract in a say a Word document or something. Don't write it directly into the system, just in case the system crashes online or something like that. I think have the abstract saved in another place, just in case something goes wrong and you don't want to lose the abstract. Yeah, that's just thanks. Aligning your abstract with the conference. Someone wants more clarity on that. Okay, so again, I'm just going to use the PsySSA Conference as an example, because that is, I assume most of us here are interested in that conference. So the PsySSA is a psychology conference. It's very broad. I've spoken about things at PsySSA before that I'm not sure psychology in a conventional sense, but you do need to kind of show in some way, like, look, this study or this thing I'm presenting on is concerned with some kind of psychological process. Psychology comes in some way, whether it's healing, or whether it's sort of unconscious repetition, or whether it's cognitive deficits or something. You just allude to some sort of psychological process, because this is like the Psychological Congress. So that's what I mean. Like, you need to kind of align your abstract with the conference itself. But then, as I say, each conference usually has a theme, especially if it's a conference that happens every what's it called, like every year or every couple of years, like PsySSA does. So every year you'll see PsySSA has a theme. This year, I said, I think it's solidarity. And so in the abstract that you have, you don't have to say, like, I'm going to be speaking about solidarity exclusively, but it is nice if you show how this presentation that you're giving, that's in some way related to psychology, is also in some way concerned with solidarity or some sort of cooperative relationship, which isn't too difficult to do. And it's good to allude to, just to sort of, as I say, align your abstract with the conference and the conference theme. Yeah, I hope that helps a little bit. I don't know if there are any other questions at this stage. There's another one here. Does my abstract have to target a particular population? Do you mean an audience? Not necessarily. It's sometimes you want to, as I said, sometimes you want a particular audience. Sometimes you want to speak to fellow students, to supervisors. Maybe there's someone there whose research you're very interested in, and that you want them to attend. But maybe you just want as many people as possible to come, and that's also fine. So you don't have to have a single audience in mind. But if you do, it's quite good to keep that audience in mind as you're writing the abstract, so you can sort of reference things that they might be familiar with and that might draw them to your presentation. Is there a specific field in psychology that the abstract should align with? No. So again, it depends what conference. So PsySSA is sort of a broad umbrella. Any psychological discipline, and even sort of psychological practice that takes place outside of a specific psychological field is welcome into PsySSA. And so you'll see, if you look at abstract from previous conferences, all sorts of fields are in there. But there are conferences, for example, later this year, there's the International Conference of Community Psychology that's being held in Lagos. And for that one, you won't be able to speak, for example, about cognitive psychology, because it's a community psychology conference, and you'll need to relate it specifically to community. So PsySSA, as I say, all psychology, but there are other more specialized psychological conferences that you'll need to cater your abstract to if you go to those.
Hi, Nick. Do you mind if I come in for a bit? Ntabiseng from PsySSA.
No, go ahead.
I just want to give clarity a bit with regards to our theme for this year. It's actually psychology in transition, humanity, technology, and the future of care.
Oh, okay. Sorry.
So that's the theme for this year.
Okay, so but thank you for saying that, because it's so broad as well. So it's not difficult to tie your presentation in with such a nice broad theme. So yeah, it's to reference some of those keywords or allude to them in your abstract will show the conference organizers that you made an effort to kind of align your presentation with the conference. So thanks for that, Tabitha. I don't know if there's any other questions. Okay, hold on. Yeah, there's one in this chat. Audience or other person might. Are there any follow-up questions from audience members or other professionals that you might recommend abstract presenters prepare for? Maybe some common queries that are asked during conference questions. Okay, so the next one of these workshops that I'm going to do, I'm going to speak about not abstract preparation, but actually delivering the conference itself. And so I will touch exactly that, what the kind of stuff that might happen in the Q&A, and the kind of I can touch on it now, but it doesn't really relate to the abstract. It's more the presenting. I know it's the thing people are most nervous about often when giving a presentation is the Q&A, but it's what I'd say is it's not really, this topic so well. It's rare that you get a nasty person that wants to sort of, humiliate you or something like that. And even if you do, there's particular ways we can deal with them. So if we could, I'll talk a little bit more to the Q&A stuff in the next presentation. But just to say, I know it's harrowing. I also don't like it myself, but there are things you can do, and you do know this topic that you have been researching very well, and so you are generally able to answer the Q&As better than you can. And if you can't, it's also possible to just say, I'm not sure. Anyone in the audience? There's a few things we'll talk about there. So the Q&As will be spoken more in the next one. Okay, then someone's asked for the theme to be written out, and so here it is: psychology and transition, humanity, technology, and the future of care. Again, lots of keywords there that are broad enough for you to speak to in your abstract in some way. Someone's asked about the Lagos conference. That conference is called the International Conference of Community Psychology, ICCP 2026. You can Google that and it should come up. Will the recording be shared? Yes, apparently it will, along with the slides. If I can just ask, sorry, I'm sure Shazia will say this when she shares everything, but just to please not distribute the slides or the recording. But obviously you are all welcome to look at it. So yeah, thank you for that. Okay, so I think that's all the questions in the chat. I don't know if there's anything else people want to ask, unmute themselves and ask. If not, as I say, if you think of something later down the line, you are welcome to email me.
Nick, I don't know if we noted the checklist that we've created, the one that Francia shared with you. We will be also uploading that onto our website. So yeah, we'll also forward that with the recording and your slides to everybody.
Yeah. Thanks for that, Fatima. Sorry, I forgot about that. So some of the little tips and stuff that I've mentioned here will be kind of condensed and summarized into a little checklist a really nice checklist that Fatima and Shazia put together, designed very nicely. And it's kind of got the kind of core takeaways from some of the things we spoke about here. Yeah, which is very useful. And so you'll all get that later as well.
I think if we don't have any questions, Nick, to say a big thank you on behalf of PsySSA. And just to remind everybody that this is a 3-part series and we've got 2 more workshops that will be coming up.
Yeah, the next one will be on presenting, where we'll cover the Q&A stuff, as well as some things to calm your nerves. And presenting is, I'm not sure anyone likes it, but it can be quite generative and rewarding in some ways. So we'll talk about that. And then the third one will be on publishing, which some people will be interested in. Okay, so thanks all. I know it's late, and to listen to one voice speak at you for an hour is draining a little bit, I know. So thank you for joining us this evening. I appreciate it, and yeah, be in touch soon, and hope to see some of you at the next one on presenting.
Thanks, Nick. Thanks all that have attended. Have a good evening. Bye-bye.
Thanks, everyone. Bye-bye.